In addition to using data loader interactively to import and export data, you can run it from the command line also. Okay, so in addition to using the data loader that we were using from that installed application, from the interface where you go and click on the insert or upsert or update operation, what you can do, you can actually use your data loader from the command line also. Okay, you can use commands to automate the import and export of data. Now, what will happen, or what is the benefit of using this command line data loader? The benefit of this command line data loader is you can automate these commands. Okay, so this is something which is available only on Windows, so that is one. Now in Windows, what happens, you can actually automate those your commands, right? And if you are able to process a data load using the command line, then you can automate that also, right? You can just go and put your file in a certain location, okay, or some other ETL system can actually generate a file and it can put it in a certain location, and this automated command can pick the file from that location as per the defined schedule. It can pick the file from that particular location, and then it can go ahead and process the data. Okay, so so in that ways there will be no manual interaction required. So that is the purpose of this command line data loader. Okay, so what we are going to discuss is we are going to primarily understand how does this work. Okay, and it has got several pieces which we'll have to understand. Okay, so when you use data loader from the command line, first thing that we have to understand that there is no user interface. So when we are using it from the command line, I hope you all know what is command line. This is command line. Okay, so when you are using data loader from here, when you are actually trying to call a data load operation from here or a data load processing from here, there is no user interface. What are you doing? You're typing, and you are actually executing the code, right? So that is the thing. So there will be some command which has to start processing certain things. So there is no user interface, there is no user involved in this entire process, right? So in that case, there are a few things that we have to understand. What is that we have to understand? So in case of a command line data loader, there is no user interface. Therefore, you provide the information that you would enter in the user interface in a text file. So in a user interface, what do we do? Let's quickly think of what all things do we need to work with a data loader. Let's kind of put things into perspective. Before we get into this, before we start understanding the process here, let's quickly list down what all things we need while we are actually working with the data loader. You need to work with your login ID. You supply it through the user interface. Password, security token. What else do we do? Our CSV file containing the data, field mapping, right? So we supply the login ID, password, security token to login into it. Then we need to supply the CSV file. We need to do the field mapping. Either we do the field mapping on the user interface or we use a file for that. Now, other than that, what else do we do? We define location for log files, success and error logs, right? We would define the location for the log files. All right, so all these things need to be done. Okay, now if you're trying to do it through a command line, what you have to do, you'll have to make sure that all this information is available, and the command knows which information is available, where is the CSV file, where is your mapping file, what is your login ID, what is your password, right? So all these information, like information like your login ID, password, security token, these also need to be supplied in a text format so that it can go to a certain place. pick the login ID password from a certain place. You have to store it, in a place from where the username, password, those things can be picked, and then login can happen, right? After that, it would know that, okay, fine, from here I have to pick the CSV file, here I have the mapping file, here I have to store the log files. So all these instructions, all these directions, all these information needs to be provided. Okay, that is what is required, because there is no user interface. In case of a user interface, you can manually go browse and define that, but here everything needs to be defined beforehand, before the command runs. Okay, so that is the thing. So since there is no user interface, you need to provide the information that you would enter in the user interface. So the information that you would enter in a user interface needs to be entered in a text file, and this text file is called process-conf.xml. Okay, so there is a text file where you will have to insert all these details, including where is your CSV file stored, where is a mapping file, what is the user ID, what is your password, what is security token. All these things need to be defined in this particular file. Okay, and where is this file? This file is actually, this process-conf file is already there in your data loader folder. Okay, so in the data loader folder, there is this file which is already there. You'll have to define the values correctly in that particular file. Okay, so yeah, I'll go to the file and I'll show you the file and all in some time, but before that, let's understand. For example, you add the username and password that data loader uses to log in into Salesforce. You'll have to put the username and password as part of this process-conf file, so that when the process is running, it knows that this is the username I have to use, this is the password I have to use. Okay, now username, putting the username in this process-conf file is okay. The configuration, this is the configuration file. Let's call this as configuration file. Now putting the username in the configuration file is fine, I'm okay with that. Okay, but putting the password in the configuration file is something which may not be the right approach, right? So what needs to be done for password? The password must be encrypted before you add it to the process-conf.xml file. So before you put the password, so instead of putting your password in the configuration file, you need to encrypt the password, which makes a lot of sense, right? Why would I put my password without even encrypting it in the configuration file? So this file can be accessed by multiple people. So this is just a text file which is in your system or on your server. So there are people who can access this particular file. So I would not be putting the password directly. So the password needs to be encrypted, and I'll have to put that particular encrypted version of the password. Okay, now when you are encrypting the password, then while you are encrypting the password, you also have to work with the encryption key, which can be used for encrypting or decrypting the password, right? There is this encryption key concept. That key actually encrypts the password, and the same key will be used for decrypting the password. Got it? So that is there. All right, so there is this small thing that you have to do. You'll have to encrypt your password. You'll have to generate the key for encrypting the password, and that same key, for example, it's let me put it in simple words for people who find it difficult to understand. So when you are trying to lock your house, what do you need? You need a key also for it, right? The same key which you use for locking the house, the same key is used for opening the house also, right? So it's important to have a key, right? Same way, when we are encrypting some data, we use that using a key. Okay, and the same key is used for decrypting the data also when it needs to be used. Correct? So that is the thing. So now let's quickly understand the steps for processing data through command line data loader. What are the steps? So now we have understood that we'll need everything defined, starting from username, password, to your CSV file, field mapping file, to your where do you want to store your log files, and everything needs to be defined. Okay, now let's quickly understand the steps for it. Step one is create the encryption key. So first first thing that you have to do is you have to create the encryption key. Okay, you have to create the key which will encrypt your password. Step 1. Step 2, create the encrypted password. So step 2, I will encrypt the password. Okay, using the key I will encrypt the password. Third step, create the field mapping file. Field mapping, as we have seen in data loader, on the user interface we have that option of choosing which column corresponds to which field in Salesforce. Since it is being done through command line, you may not be having the user interface, you will not be doing it through user interface, so you'll have to make sure that you supply the field mapping file here. This is required here. Okay, otherwise at the time of processing it would not understand that which which column from your CSV goes into which field in Salesforce. Okay. Now, step 4 will be create a process.conf.xml, the configuration file, and that contains the import configuration settings. So now what you have to do, this process configuration file next you have to create, and this file should contain the import configuration settings. Okay. So configuration settings need to be, put into this. Step 5 will be run the process and import the data. Final process step is run the process and import the data. Okay, so this is what we are basically going to do. All right, now before I go through each of these steps one by one, I'm going to introduce you to some of the files which are part of your data loader folder, which you will have to work with while we are doing this. Okay, so if you go to your data loader folder, wherever it is installed in your system, if you go to your data loader folder, for example, for me, this is where it is installed. You need to know where exactly your data loader folder is installed. So for me, it is installed here. I'll go to this version. Okay, and this you would see a few folders and files which we are going to use for command line data loader. So I'll quickly introduce you to those files. So one is this bin folder. Okay, so if you open this bin folder, if you will see that there are two files here, encrypt.bat and process.bat. Okay, so this encrypt.bat is basically going to be used for encrypting the password. Okay, I'll use this encrypt.bat for encrypting the password. Okay, process.bat is the file which I will use for executing the process. Okay, so this is what will be used for executing the process, insert or update or whatever process I want to do. So these two files are here. These are two useful files. Let's understand. Another is configs. No, sorry, not configs. Samples. So inside samples, you have conf folder, and this conf folder will have this process-conf.xml. Okay, this is an XML file which has got all the details of configuration. Okay, now by default, whatever you have, so if you have got data loader installed on your system, you will have this folder, you will have this file here. Okay, now by default, it will have some generic values. Okay, and what you have to do, you have to go and update those config settings or config values as per your system values. For example, you'll have to replace the login with your login ID, you'll have to replace the password with your password and stuff like that. Okay, so this is how it looks. It has got a lot of information around so this usually has a generic file. Okay, and you would see that there are certain things like username being supplied here. Okay, and then the password being supplied here. Okay, the password encryption key supplied here, right? So all these things we'll have to supply actually. Okay, so this file is already there as part of your data loader, so you don't have to do anything for this particular file. It is already there. All that you have to do is you'll have to replace the values in that config file. Okay, now let's go ahead and understand things step by step. So first step is what? Create the encryption key file. So to create the encryption key file, what is that you have to do? You just have to open a command prompt window. Okay, so first of all, I am going to create my encryption key file, the key file for encrypting my password. I'm going to create that file first. Okay, so for this, what do? You just open a command prompt window, navigate to the data loader bin directory. You'll have to navigate to the bin directory in data loader, and this can be the path. Let's keep on doing it. uh, okay, so you can simply open command prompt on your system. This is only available in Windows. Okay, now what you have to do, you simply have to navigate to your bin folder. All right, slash whatever is the version. Okay, so that is it. To change the directory, there is the cd which is used. So right now I'm under this directory. I have to go further down to the bin folder. So you just have to understand the path very well. Where exactly is your bin folder? Yeah, this is wrong. What have I done wrong here? .0.1/bin. Yeah, so you have to navigate till the bin folder. Okay, so you can see this example here. Okay, now what is the next thing that you do? You have to create your encryption key file. So right after this, what you have to do, you simply have to create your encryption key file. So once you are at this location, you are at this folder, at the bin folder, then creating an encryption key file is simple. There is just one small command that you have to use, which is encrypt.bat. Now this, you have to remember this, that this encrypt.bat is where this encrypt.bat file is in the bin folder, right? We just saw this. So we have to be in this directory, otherwise it will not know where this encrypt.bat. So I am in this location and I would say encrypt.bat. And for generating the key file, you have to put -k. Okay, this command is used for generating or creating your key file. Yeah, so it says the key file got created, right? The key file has got created, and it also gives you the location of your key file. So this is the location where your key file is stored. Under the .data loader folder, there is this file called data loader.key. Okay, so this is the key file which will be used for encrypting the data. All right, not data, encrypting the password. Okay, so now we can actually use the we can use the same encrypt.bat to encrypt the password using this particular key file. All right, there's one small thing that you have to keep in mind when you are trying to work with this encrypt.bat. This encrypt.bat needs to have an environment variable. Just give me 1 second. I'll log in and I'll show it to you. So in your Windows, there is something called environment variables. You need to have this you need to have this environment variable called Java Home to be set up. Okay, if you don't have this Java Home environment variable, then it will throw an error. Okay, so if you don't have this environment variable created, you will be getting an error. Okay, now in case you get the same error while you're trying to create this encryption key file, if it says that this Java home variable is not available or something like that, all that you have to do is you just have to go to environment variables, which you can search from start. in your system and create a new environment variable. Okay, variable name will be Java home and value will be the location of your Zulu folder. Okay, wherever you have installed Zulu. So remember, before you installed Data Loader, there was this Zulu that you installed. So you just have to browse the location of Zulu. So select this location and click on OK. Okay, it will ask you Java, JRE, and all that stuff. So everything is taken care of by this Zulu that you install here. Okay, so you just have to put the location for your Zulu and go to this particular folder which has got the version of it. Right now it is 11. So go to this and click on OK. So this needs to be there. If it is not there, then it may possibly throw an error. So I'm just giving you a heads up. If you get that error, then you'll have to do this settings. Okay, create an environment variable. Name of the environment variable should be Java underscore home. Value should be this. Okay, now I don't need anything here because I already have that. So for me, it did not throw an error, of course, because I already have that environment variable. Now that part is done. Encryption file is ready. Now what is the next thing that I have to do? Encrypt.bat. Okay, now what you have to do, you just have to note the file path. Okay, because when you're trying, when you're going to go encrypt the password, you'll have to use the path. Okay, so this is the file path. Let me see what is the file path in my case. So this is the file path. I can actually just make a note of it. I will my key file path is this. Okay, let me just keep it and proceed further. So the encryption key file got created. I know where exactly it is stored. I know the location of it. Now what is the next thing that we have to do? The next thing is in the command prompt. The next thing is basically encrypting the password. Now you have to encrypt the password. So in the command prompt window, use encrypt.bat command to encrypt the password. Now we'll again use the encrypt.bat command to encrypt the password. Okay. Now, how are we going to do that? For encrypting the password, I will use encrypt.bat, and along with that, I'm going to use -e. All right. So for creating the key, I used encrypt.bat with this -k. Now for encrypting the password, I will use another command, encrypt.bat. If you want to just see a list of all the commands which are available under encrypt.bat, what you can do, you can simply run encrypt.bat, press enter, it will show you. See, so it has got 3 commands only. E is for encrypting a password, so or encrypting a string text value. Okay, it can encrypt plain text. This D is for decrypting. It can decrypt an encrypted text to normal text. Okay, and this K is for generating the key file. So there are only 3 commands. Okay, so first command I've used for creating the key file. Now I'm going to encrypt. So for encrypting, what I'm going to do, I am going to use the other command, encrypt.bat. Okay, all right. Now along with this, what you have to do, you have to put the password plus security token here and the key file path. So it should be like this, encrypt.bat -e, your password combined with the security token, and then space, and then the location of your key file, which means what? So this encrypt.bat will encrypt this text, okay, and using this encryption key. That is it. Okay, so let's go ahead and do that. One second, let me open the command prompt. Okay, so Let's say my password is 1234. You can actually replace this with your password, actual password. And then there is a security token also, which has to come here. Let's say this is security token. Okay. And now, so your password security token can come here. I'm not putting my actual password or security token here right now, but you can put your password security token, put a space, and sorry, I think this is blocked. Okay, let me show this one more time. So encrypt.bat, put hyphen, and then you put in your password here, put in your security token here. I'm not putting in my actual password and security token, but you can put your password security token here. That needs to be encrypted. And now what is that you have to do? You have to put the key file path here. The key file path I just had taken. So this is my key file path. Okay. So now if I run this command, it is going to encrypt this text, which is a combination of my password and the security token using this key, and it is going to give me the encrypted version of it. Let's press enter. If everything is fine, it should encrypt it and give us the encrypted version. Yes. This is your encrypted password security token. I mean, this is the encrypted version of this text actually. So ideally you should have put your password and security token here. Okay. Take this and save it. Copy this and put it somewhere. Okay. Now this is my encrypted password. So basically what happens, why are we actually encrypting it? Now with this encrypted version of it, what you can do, you can easily go and put it in the configuration file, and no one looking at this can understand that what is your actual password. Okay. Only this will work with the encryption key at the time of processing. It will decrypt the password automatically, and it will then use that particular thing. But whatever is stored in your file is this. So users cannot actually uh, you know see your password or misuse it. Okay, that's the concept of encryption. So this is my encrypted password. So I need to still keep this key file, because there's something which I'll have to use in the configuration file. So password encryption is done. Copy the generated encrypted password. We will use this value in a later step in the configuration file instead of putting the password. So instead of putting the actual password, we are going to put the encrypted password. So you can just copy and keep it aside. So we just done with encrypting the password also. Now the next step is create the mapping field mapping file. So now other thing I have to work with is I have to create the field mapping file. So what is this field mapping file? Field mapping file will have the files the CSV columns mapped to the Salesforce fields, which we do through the user interface. But in this case, since we are not going to do it through the user interface, we are just going to do it through, we'll have to just make sure that this file is there. So you create a mapping file with an .sdl file extension. Okay. So you just create a mapping file and save it with a .sdl file extension. In each line of the mapping file, pair a data source with its destination. Let's see the example. Okay. So let's say name field from CSV. So the left side is CSV, right side is your Salesforce. Okay. So in the left side, put which field or which header from CSV corresponds to which field in Salesforce. Source field values are in the left side. Source fields means your CSV field values, and on the right hand side, you have got your Salesforce field values. That is it. So this field, this simply needs to, you just open a text file, put these field mappings. Okay, left side you will have the header from your CSV, and right side you have to put the corresponding field name from Salesforce, and that's it. Finally, you just save it in .sdl format. Save it wherever you want. Okay, but you save it in .sdl format. Okay, Now, for complex mappings, you can use the data loader user interface to map source and destination fields. So if you remember in data loader user interface also, when we create those field mappings, we have the option of, saving the field maps, right? So if there is a long one, complex one, you find it difficult to, create it in the notepad sort of thing or a text editor. What you can do, you can basically, save that particular field mapping in the data loader user interface also. Correct. So that is also something which can be done. That also saves it in .sdl format, so that file can also be used. Okay, that is it. Now, so we are done with encrypting the password, and we have also set up the field mapping file. Now, what is the next thing? The next thing is we just have to work with the configuration file. Okay, so now working with the configuration file, what we need to do, we just have to go to the process-conf file, which contains the information that data loader needs to process the data. Okay, now this process.conf.xml will contain the information that your data loader needs to process the data. Okay, so this is the configuration file which will have your login ID, password, field mapping, the file which needs to be processed. All these things need to be supplied inside this configuration file. Okay, that is what we have to work with. Okay, now let's have a quick look at the process-conf file one more time. We just were looking at this earlier. Okay, so this is how your process-conf file looks. Okay, if you look at this, it has got, this file has got different beans. Okay, this is an XML file. All right, so you will see that there is, one bean and then there is another bean. Okay, one bean can be actually considered as one single operation. Okay, so usually your process conf file may not be this longer. I mean, it has got multiple operation. Each bean is actually referring to one transaction, one operation. Okay, so you can have insert in one, you can have another operation, export in another one, or update in another one, that way. So ideally you should just have, for one single operation you can have just this much of code. Got it? In your process conf file. Okay, and if you look at this, it will have, all the details, which you have to supply, which object you want to, do this. You supply your password, supply the encryption file location, supply the username, supply the endpoint. So these are values you just have to supply. That is it. Okay, so what you have to do, you just have to create this process conf file, which is already there. You just have to update some of the values there and you will have to use those. So that's what we have to do. Now okay. Now when you're doing this, you just need to ensure one thing, that you keep a copy of the original file. So in your data loader, this file is under samples, data loader version, samples, conf. Inside that you have this got process-conf.xml. Okay, so when you are working with this, please make sure that you work on a duplicate copy of it. You do not make any changes to the actual file, because the actual file has got the structure of all the different operations which can be done. Okay, now what I've done is I have created a file with just one operation, with just one bean. Okay, so every single bean can be one operation. Okay, got that? So that is it. Now before we do anything on this process configuration file, let's understand a little more about what are the variables and values which we'll need to work with. Okay, so each bean in the process conf file refers to a single process, such as insert, upsert, and or export. Okay, so that is there. This file can contain multiple processes. So, one process-conf file can have multiple processes also. So that is also possible. Maintain a copy of the original because it contains example of other types of data loader processing such as upserts and exports. So you should maintain the original copy because it has got sample or structure of all the operations like upsert operation for an export operation and all. For everything there is this thing defined. All right. Modify the parameters in the process-conf.xml file. Okay, so what you have to do, you simply have to just go and replace those values. Okay, and which all values you need to replace, let me quickly tell you. So there is a parameter called sfdc.endpoint. I mean, this sfdc.endpoint, what you have to do, you simply have to go and enter the URL of the Salesforce instance for your organization. Okay, for example, you can have your Salesforce instance as ap16.salesforce.com. Okay, or you're trying to log in through using a login.salesforce.com. So just put your Salesforce instance there. Username, this will need to have the username of your Salesforce account. Put this username here. Password, enter the encrypted password value that you created. Okay, enter the encrypted password that we just created. We'll have to set that here. Process.mapping file, here enter the path and the file name of the mapping file that we have created. Data access.name, enter the path and file name of the data file that contains the account records or whichever records that need to be processed. Okay, data access.name will be the path and the file name, the CSV file, which needs to be processed. sfdc.debug messages. Now this currently is set to true for troubleshooting, set to false after your import is up and running. So for this is basically for troubleshooting any of the issues. So you can basically set it up. This will show you debug any messages while it is trying to process. Those will be shown. You can set it false later on. sfdc.debug message file. Now this message file is a location where your debug messages can be stored. Okay, you just define a location where this needs to be stored. Process.output success. This is where you define the location where you want to store the success log file. So we have discussed about this earlier. We can define a location where our success and error log files will be stored. So when we are working with command line data loader, process.output success is where you will define the location of where your success log files will be stored. This process.output error, this is the location where your error log files will be stored. All right. Okay, now let's go ahead and see this. I think most of these are already defined. Just quickly check this. Okay, so this is the structure of your file, so we don't have to worry too much about things. Only thing is that the bean that we start, so the structure is already there. The ID that you define here, this ID is basically going to be used to call this operation. Okay, bean here is one operation, insert, update, whatever it is. You can just you can give a name to it, and this name will be used for calling this operation. All right, that is there. Now, other values which I have to put here, I have put, okay, description can be anything, so it's okay. Okay, yeah. So these are the entry values here. So debug messages, I said if you want to put debug messages, you can set it true or make it false if you don't want debug messages. Location for your debug messages file. So debug message file can be stored in a location. So here, what I'm doing, I've just given a location where I want to store this. Okay, just put a location, just create a directory in your system, and give the location for that directory. So your debug message file will get stored there. sfdc endpoint, login.salesforce.com. Okay, it's fine. sfdc username, I put my username here. So in the value, you just need to put in your username. Okay, password has to be encrypted, right? So you cannot simply just go and put your username that way. Sorry, you cannot put the password. I cannot put my actual password here. So what I should do, I should basically get the encrypted version of it. This is my encrypted version password. Take it and put it here. Okay. Key. So your password encryption key. You just have to define the location and the file name of the key that you have created for encrypting and decrypting the password, because the key is required for decrypting the password also, right? So from this encrypted format to decrypt it, the key will be required. So you just define the location. Again, the location for the key file is here. You can put this there. Okay. So all the other things are not that important. Let's look at the mapping file. Where is the mapping file? Yeah, here is the mapping file. Okay, in this you can set up the location of the mapping file wherever you have saved the .sdl file that we created, the mapping file that needs to be defined here. Data access, this will have the location for the actual CSV file from where it needs to pick the CSV file. Okay. All right. And then what is next? The next thing is the output success and output error location. So these output success and output error basically refers to the location where you want to store the success and error log files. So you can just define a directory where your success log and error log files will be stored. Okay, that is it. So these are the key config settings that you have to do. Once you have defined all these things properly, then you are ready to go ahead and process your data load through command line. All right. Now, to process your data load through command line, what is that we are going to do? Which function or which command are we going to use now? Now we are going to use process.bat. Okay. So remember, under this, inside this bin folder, there were two files. One is encrypt.bat and one is process.bat. So, encrypt.bat is used for encrypting the file, and now the process.bat is what I have to use to process, put this, process into the command line, and we have to execute that. Okay, so let's do that now. Just give me one quick moment. I'll give you the exact syntax for initiating the process. Okay, yeah. So this process.bat, when we are running, we just have to give two more things. One, you have to give the directory where this config dot process-conf.xml is stored. So you have to give the directory for that. That is one. And second is the bean ID. Which process do you want to execute from it? So your process conf file can have multiple operations, right? So you just have to define the bean ID here, and this should be your location for process conf file. All right, that is it. Now if I have to check the directory, just go to this particular folder, copy the address of this directory. You can put it here. Okay. All right. So three things that need to be supplied as part of this particular operation: process.bat space. Put the directory location where your process-conf file is there. Process-conf file has got all the details, including your login ID, password, encryption key, where it is stored, where field mapping is there. So all that you have to do is in this command, you have to define the location for your process-conf file, and just after space you put the bean ID here. Okay, bean ID is account insert. I will show you this operation. What is a bean ID? Account insert. You can put it whatever you want, and then you can call that. That's okay. Okay, that is it. So this process.bat will now go to this particular folder, pick the process.conf file, sorry, process configuration file, and from there it is going to run this particular bean ID. That is what it means. I cannot run it now because I have not. If I run it now, it is actually going to throw error because I have actually provided a wrong password. I mean, this password is not correct, so it will not be able to log in into that. Right. So the encryption that I've created of the password is not of actual password. So that is the reason why it would throw an error. Uh, that is the thing. All right. But you should be able to, run it, and, this will basically execute your process for running, data loader directly from command line. Now, since this is from the command line, what you can do is you can schedule it also. Now, that is again a capability of your Windows to schedule your commands from the command line. So that is something which you can easily do in Windows. So that ways you can actually schedule this as well. Got it? Okay, so that's how we work with our command line data loader without using any user interface.